Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words to your important conference. I'm only sorry I can't be with you in person. What I thought would be helpful would be, first of all, to clarify what the concept of natural capital is all about, what it means, and importantly, what it doesn't mean. Then I want to turn to the question of how far peatlands fit into a natural capital framework and how we should treat peatlands in any natural capital accounts. That leads on to what are the public goods and other public benefits that peatlands deliver, how should we pay for them, and how should we go about enhancing them to leave them in a better state for future generations than we inherited them. So that's my agenda, and we need to be clear about the concepts before we go to the details. So what is natural capital? Well, the simple answer, and indeed the correct answer, is it's all the stuff that nature provides us for free. It's not like physical capital, it's not like labour, it's not like human capital. It's something that's our inheritance on this planet, and it's something which we have a duty to be good stewards of because it's what the future generation should inherit. And that's why it figures centrally in any consideration of the environment. Now, it's quite important to recognise that what I haven't said is that natural capital is some kind of utility or some kind of neoliberal economic flow of services. It's about assets, and those assets are what we require in order to live a good and full life, and those are the assets which every generation is entitled to. Of course, they do yield utility and benefits, and I'll come to those in a moment, but we can't know what the value of peatlands will be to 2 generations from now, 3 generations, 4 generations going forward. This is uncertain. What we can know is that if we deplete and destroy those peatlands, they simply won't be there for future generations with the knowledge and information and outlook they have to be able to enjoy and benefit from. So natural capital is an asset-based concept, and that lends itself to thinking about accounts, about balance sheets, about capital maintenance, about all the hard stuff of thinking about any kind of asset management. So we're particularly focused on assets at risk. We want to think about these assets as assets in perpetuity. There can't be any depreciation. They don't wear out like a computer or a car does. They need to be have capital maintenance to make sure that their state does not depreciate, and indeed they need enhancements if we are below, as we are, the optimal stock of these assets. So the point I want to get over here is that these are assets and they fit into a formal framework of accounting. These are hard concepts. They're not soft like sustainability type concepts. There's a proper way of measuring these things. There's a proper way of accounting for them. There's a proper way of doing capital maintenance for them. And we need to be robust, rigorous, scientific about making sure that we treat these assets in this way rather than the ways in which they've been treated in the past, which is that they're things that people say they value, but they're not prepared to place values upon. And as we know, things that aren't given values tend to get trashed. And you can just look at what's happened to peatlands, not just in the UK, but more widely, to see just what happens when we don't take these assets seriously. So, hard concept. Now, the final conceptual point I want to get over is that there are different kinds of natural capital, and broadly there are 2 that matter. There's the non-renewable natural capital. That's the stuff that nature gives us for free, but we can only use once. Once we've used it, it's gone, that's it. And that's the sort of assets which quite a lot of our modern industrial economy has been built upon. Oil, gas, minerals, iron ores, things of that sort. which we can mine up, dig out of the ground, use, but that's it. So, for example, we've depleted much of the North Sea. It's gone. There's nothing left for future generations. Somebody's got to use it. The only question is, how do we compensate people in the future for the fact that we've had the benefit, and in the case of North Sea oil and gas, bequeathed the carbon in the atmosphere for them to have to deal with. So that's one source of natural capital, and that's the one we tend to have prices for, markets for, etc. But it's not the most important natural capital. The most important natural capital is renewable natural capital. That's stuff that nature gives us for free and will keep on giving us for free forever unless we deplete it so far that it cannot do that renewing. And if we think about peat bogs, if we think about fish species, if we think about whole ecosystems, they have this renewable natural capital facility. Now here's the very special economic value that attaches. It's not like oil and gas. You work out how many barrels of oil there are, multiply them by the price and end up with the value. These are assets who are going to keep giving us value, keep giving us return, not just now, not just in 2050, not just in 2100, but forever, year after year after year after year, and until geology or evolution catches up with them. So these are really valuable assets, and they're not simply the sum of the benefits that people today get. We have to include all those future benefits, and those are potentially very large, arguably almost infinite. So that's why they're special. That's why we need to concentrate upon them. So what sort of natural capital is peatland? How does it fit into the framework? Well, it's pretty straightforward. And I suspect that most of the people in the audience today know exactly what these benefits are, at least in terms of the classes of benefits, even if they don't know the particular individual values. Carbon's the fashionable bit of peat that captures lots and lots of attention because climate change rightly captures a lot of attention. But that's just one aspect of the benefits we get from peat. It's all about biodiversity, it's all about water retention, it's all about landscapes, it's about vistas, it's about all the things that go together to enrich our lives from these wonderful landscapes. So the key point here is there are multiple benefits for peatland now and forever, every single period into the future, and that's what we have to capture. Now, how do we capture that value in terms of money, the grubby stuff that is absolutely essential if we're going to have the resources to properly maintain and enhance these assets? And remember, in case you're one of those people who is sometimes rightly suspicious of economists, economics is just the allocation of scarce resources. These are scarce resources and we do have to allocate them. And we can't do everything. Spending money on one thing means we can't spend money on other things. And so therefore we have to ensure that we protect and enhance these assets by having the right financial structures in place to support them. So what would those be? Well, carbon's the straightforward one in the sense of there's obviously a lot of carbon stored here and sequestrated, and if it's emitted, it's very, very damaging. There's also methane, of course, as part and parcel of this package. So we already have a carbon price. It's too low, but it is a carbon price, and that ought to be applied to agriculture, as I've argued elsewhere, and peat falls within that frame. In the case of peat extraction for things like horticulture, the negative environmental effects of this are probably so great that we should get pretty close to prohibiting it. It should certainly come with a very large price tag. And the converse is true too, that peatlands should gain the benefit of further sequestration of greenhouse gases. So we should just do it. And it's economically efficient to do it. And we should just simply work out the metrics, the measurements, the baselines, and monitor very closely, credibly and verifiably changes in carbon in respect to peatlands. Full stop. But that's not all of it. There's the biodiversity benefits, there's the water retention benefits, there's the water management benefits, and there's the tourist benefits, the mental health benefits, the health benefits, all these paraphernalia of things which we get from peatlands. I'll pick up a couple of these. On the water retention, water management, we already have active involvement of water companies in the management of uplands. Great examples like United Utilities involved directly in trying to preserve upland habitats to protect their water sources and flows. And it's often, or at least sometimes, cheaper to pay to maintain those assets in the uplands than it is to pay to deal with the consequences once it's in the water system and needs to be cleaned up and flood management carried. So there's quite a lot of stuff there that we can handle. Biodiversity, much harder. But then these are public goods, and these public goods deserve public support. And in our new agricultural policy, there is to be public money for public goods and almost only for public goods. And it's quite clear that we should divert substantial amounts of what are currently very large subsidies to the agricultural sector towards these primary public goods, of which peatlands are clearly a crucial part. And we should get rid of some of the perverse subsidies. I mean, the damage done to peatlands by overgrazing is a function of the inefficient subsidies we pay, which support sheep numbers, which are neither economically desirable nor environmentally benign. So cleaning up the agricultural side helps. Then there is the wider public benefits, tourism, public health, leisure, etc. Again, we should be imaginative. Many countries in Europe have a tourist or bed tax to collect money for the people who benefit from these public spaces. Again, we should think about doing that. So there's quite a lot of different revenue flows that we should build upon. We won't get to a perfect answer instantly, but the good news is every step is a step in the right direction. And so therefore we should get on with it. Carbon probably first, agricultural subsidies sorting out second, water and water management a third. Those three are the headline topics here, and then we can work out from that. Now that brings us to the last bit, which is about how to enhance these assets. You know, if we've got the public goods in place, if we've got polluters paying for the damage they're doing, if we've got compensation benefits for damage that's done, we still need to channel all this to go from where we are now, which in many cases are seriously damaged environments, to the better ones we ought to bequeath to the next generation. And here we need imagination. We need to think about how to bring all sorts of revenue streams together across the country to target on these core natural assets which are so important to the future. I've argued in my Natural Capital book and elsewhere that we need a proper nature fund to do this. I've argued that the monies that come out of the environmental compensation for damage done for large-scale developments, some of that ought to go into such a broad fund. And I've argued elsewhere that the monies that come from depleting things like the North Sea ought to be set aside for environmental benefits elsewhere. We need imagination here to bring these funding sources together. But before we do that, it's the job of people like you to define what our peatlands could look like in 25 years' time, to give us a picture so we can imagine a future, a prize so much better than we have now. Then we have something very clear to aim for, to aspire to, and then we can get on with the building blocks of making sure as much of that as possible is put in place. So my conclusion is, over to you. You work out the details, and then we can apply the framework. Thank you very much.